Nice.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, hope you guys are all doing well, and hopefully you're all having a great Christmas. Welcome back to my video game review series. So with today being Christmas, it's of course time for my yearly tradition of reviewing a Christmas themed video game. Yeah, those of you who have been following my channel for a while will know that every year on Christmas Day, I review a Christmas game. I'll leave a link in the description section to my Christmas review playlist for anyone who's interested. Today we're going to be looking at a game that recently saw its 10th anniversary, Batman Arkham Origins, released in 2013, developed by Warner Bros. Montreal. So Arkham Origins is the third installment in the Batman Arkham series, and serves as a prequel, being set several years before the events of Arkham Asylum where the series began. It's also the only game in the series not to be developed by Rocksteady. Right off the bat, I want to point out that this is going to be a long video, because I have a lot to say about this game, and a lot of mixed feelings on it. And it's one of those games where I've never really been able to properly articulate my thoughts on it. There are times where I think the game is a masterpiece, and there's other times where I feel as if it's simply a bloated rehash of better games that came before it. Then there's even times where I feel like the game was simply an unnecessary prequel that added nothing of value to the series. Suffice it to say, this is a game that I'm torn on, and I have been ever since its release back in 2013. I mean, objectively speaking, the game is great. It has all the things you'd expect it to have from a gameplay perspective. It's a game that functions the way it's supposed to, and there's no doubt a lot of fun to be had with it. But at the same time, there's something about this game that just holds it back from being as great as its predecessors. And with this video, I'm going to do as best I can to assess the game as rationally and as objectively as possible, and give it a thorough retrospective, taking everything into consideration. Those of you who have been following my channel recently will know that I just did a full 100% Let's Play for both Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, both of which happen to be some of my favourite games of all time. The series' popularity pretty much peaked with Arkham City, with that game being generally considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest superhero game of all time, meaning that with Origins coming out just 2 years later, it had a lot to live up to. I remember very clearly when Origins came out, being quite apprehensive about it, since I thought surely they were never going to be able to top what they did with Arkham City. So just like all the games in the series, the game is a third-person action-adventure game where you play as Batman. The story of the game is actually a pretty simple one. As I mentioned before, it takes place several years before the events of Arkham Asylum, and shows a glimpse into the early part of Batman's career as a crime fighter. Batman in this game is a lot younger, a lot less experienced, and a lot more hot-headed and reckless than in previous games. And the early part of the game hammers that point home at every opportunity.
Get away! Where's the Penguin? I don't know. Where is he? I swear. Damn.
Yeah, this is a more edgy and emotional Batman.
When the mugger or the thief stops to think twice, that is fear. That is what I am. That is why they hired assassins, because I am the reason the criminals breathe easier when the sun rises. So no, Alfred, I am not in over my head. Tonight will be my end, but it will be theirs.
The game begins with Gotham's largest prison being broken into by Black Mask and his forces. Black Mask is initially introduced as the game's main villain, and you guys might remember that he made a brief appearance in Arkham City during the intro, and was even a boss battle in one of the DLCs, but I digress. Black Mask along with his gang break into the prison to execute the corrupt police commissioner. The level serves as a tutorial for the game, where Batman will have to fight his way through the prison, attempting to stop Black Mask. Once the tutorial is over, and you get a pretty lame boss battle with Killer Croc, who doesn't make another appearance until the very end of the game, weirdly enough. That's when the game really begins. You find out that Black Mask has put a $50 million bounty on Batman's head, and every criminal in the city, along with several members of Batman's Rogues Gallery, are after him. Batman will have to take down each assassin one at a time and try to locate Black Mask to get the bounty removed. So conceptually, the game has everything it needs to succeed. It takes pretty much the exact same gameplay formula from Arkham City, as well as the open world sandbox format. It has a bunch of supervillains for you to fight, and some relatively high stakes. So all in all, the game really should be a masterpiece. I mean, it has no reason not to be. Here's the problem though. As I mentioned before, when this game came out, and when it was first being hyped up, I was apprehensive about it. The reason for this is that I tend to have a pretty good intuition in regards to a game's quality based on its marketing and the overall timing of its release. And to be honest, I couldn't help but notice when this game came out that there were several warning signs that it was going to have problems. First of all, again, as I previously mentioned, this game wasn't developed by Rocksteady. It was developed by a separate team, and with a relatively short development cycle. Also, with it being a prequel, and with Arkham City being so great and so climactic, there was no way in my mind that this game was ever going to live up to it. And it was never going to be a good sequel to Arkham City. Anything that this game had to offer that I could praise, be it the excellent combat, the way you traverse the city, and the way the story flows, all of this is just Arkham City all over again, with very little if any changes or improvements. In fact, I would argue that this game in some ways is a downgrade from Arkham City. The story, in my opinion, isn't quite as interesting, the boss battles are nowhere near as good, even the open world is significantly less interesting this time, with many of the locations being the same as Arkham City, but without the interesting curiosities and world building in them. I'll talk more about this later. And if truth be told, this was the first game in the series that felt to me like a bloated Ubisoft style game. And there was definitely an air of franchise fatigue, which is one way of describing it. So the game's combat is practically the same as Arkham City. You strike enemies and build up your combo. When an enemy tries to attack you, you simply counter them. As your combo builds up, your attacks become stronger and more fluid. Once again, there's plenty of enemy variety, and the gadgets are well implemented into the game's combat. Speaking of enemies, you of course have your standard thugs and criminals to contend with all over the city, each of them wanting a piece of that bounty. Throughout the game they will have different weapons such as shock sticks, shields and various blunt weapons, each with their own way of bringing them down, just like in previous games. Pretty much all the assassins have their own hired mercenaries, each with their own style, though for the most part they're just reskinned versions of each other. You have a couple of new enemy types such as the martial artists, who are less predictable than the standard thugs, and present a bit more of a challenge. And you also have these large enemies who are basically smaller versions of the Titan thugs from the previous games. You even have the ninja chicks from Arkham City, although they look a little bit different here. Speaking of gadgets, you have some of the same ones from previous games, such as the Batarangs, Batclaw and several others. There are also a few new gadgets added this time, some of which are obtained at predetermined points in the story, though some are simply to replace the ones from Arkham City, that are absent here for the sake of continuity, one of the many problems with prequels. Though weirdly enough, this game still has the grapnel boost that you unlocked in Arkham City, and it was explicitly stated in that game that it was a prototype. Not that I have a problem with this, I just found it interesting, but I digress. The new gadgets you get here are the remote claw which you get from Deathstroke, which is probably my favourite new gadget in the game. It was pretty badass. Not only is it used for platforming and puzzle solving, but it can also be used in combat during the stealth sections. This is really fun to use, and it actually makes the Predator challenges a lot easier than previous games. You also have the glue grenade, which is exactly the same as the freeze grenade from Arkham City, serving literally the exact same function. The concussion detonator, which is very similar to the one Robin uses in Arkham City. A disruptor, which is pretty much exactly the same as the jammer from Arkham City, once again serving the same function, another weird continuity issue. And perhaps the most interesting new gadget the electrocutioner's shock gloves. These allow you to charge certain generators to activate certain platforms and obtain certain collectibles, as well as to shock enemies in combat. Once you unlock these and level them up, most of the combat in the game becomes incredibly easy, even on the hardest difficulty. You can use these to punch through enemy armor, as well as enemy shields, and it can even bring down larger and more durable enemies quicker. A very overpowered gadget, and I personally like it. Why Batman never kept this gadget is beyond me. I think they actually addressed this in Arkham Knight, in the police station. Because yeah, you think this would have come in handy during the events of Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, but again, I digress. These new gadgets are a welcome addition to the game, and they are quite fun to use. Sadly though, the only gadgets that are in any way new or different are the remote claw and the shock gloves. Everything else is just a reskinned version of the gadgets from Arkham City. As far as the level design goes, this is a bit of a mixed bag. One thing that really disappointed me about the game was the open world itself. It just felt bland. Arkham City had a tremendously interesting and well detailed map, with every single location being distinctive in its own way. You could see the deterioration with every abandoned part of the city, and the remnants of what they used to be. They also made sense in the context of the events of that game, with each gang and faction leaving their mark. Each area looked very different. In Origins, however, everything just looks the same, and it all looks incredibly boring and bland. The colour palettes are all the same for the most part. The exterior locations look almost indistinguishable from one another for the most part. And to top it all off, it just lacks any noteworthy detail. Even the areas that were recreated from Arkham City just look lame here. The only time the game ever has an interesting or unique visual aesthetic is during its interior locations, or its cutscenes, which admittedly are pretty badass. For example, there's a level that takes place on a boat, which was quite interesting, and another that takes place in a huge hotel, where Batman will have to scale it to get to the top. That was probably my favourite level in the game. But as I mentioned before, the open world is lifeless and bland, and it makes traversing the game a complete chore to do. Speaking of traversing the game, they added fast travel this time, something that wasn't needed in Arkham City, because traversing that game was actually fun. Basically how it works is that there are radio towers located in each district of the map that you will need to shut down to access a fast travel point. Yes, this game has those classic Ubisoft towers, just what it needed. You shut down the towers by performing a puzzle, usually requiring one or more of the game's gadgets, some of which are unlockable, and this allows you to travel straight to that district. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on that subject. One thing I did like regarding the open world is that while traversing the game, you will randomly pick up radio signals indicating that a crime is being committed somewhere nearby. This reminded me of Spider-Man 2, where you would patrol the city stopping criminals and saving civilians. Unfortunately in this game, these get pretty old pretty quickly. And yeah, they never really consist of anything other than beating up criminals and breaking up gang fights, since that seems to be all the game has to offer in terms of random events. The game never mixes them up. In addition to these side activities, you can also do some detective work around the city. The game expands upon the detective sections from previous games by making them a bit more interactive here. There are several points within the story where Batman will have to set up a crime scene and piece together the events that took place there. In addition to this, you can use this same strategy to solve murders that take place around the city, bringing the perpetrator to justice Batman style.
And how'd that work out for you?
I enjoyed these for the most part, though they do get a bit boring after a while. There's a lot of them. Just like the previous games, you have the main story and a whole bunch of side missions that attempt to tie into the main story in some way. For example, you could be on your way to a mission before being alerted to a side mission where you will have one or more tasks to perform. Weirdly, some of the assassins that were hired to take down Batman don't even make an appearance during the main story, and only exist as one single side mission, such as Deadshot for example. I found this really weird for some reason, and it adds a few continuity errors to the game. Again, I'll get to that later when I talk about some spoilers. My main issue with the side missions, however, is that they're basically ripped off from the ones from Arkham City, and none of them are in any way new or original. Take for example the Anarchy side mission.
At dawn's first light, the sources of Gotham's ruin will be destroyed. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming of propaganda and consumerist garbage.
By the way, speaking of Anarchy, he was probably my favourite character in the game, since unlike all the other villains, he seemed to have a genuine ideology and worldview.
I don't work with criminals. You need to turn yourself in.
Tell you what, I'll turn myself in as soon as you do the same. You don't consider yourself a criminal, do you? The suit, the gadgets, the sense of entitlement. You're just another rich kid atoning for his fiscal sins. Such a shame.
Anarchy has basically gathered together a following of disgruntled Gotham citizens, many of them poor and homeless, who are sick and tired of crime and corruption, wanting to save the city and bring it back to its former glory. Anarchy attempts to recruit Batman into his army, and even tests him by making him disarm bombs around the city. I actually found this really interesting, because he's the only character in the game who represents some kind of neutral faction. He isn't after Batman for the bounty, and he doesn't appear to have any ulterior motive. He just wants to make a difference and take a stand against evil. He also by far gets the best lines of dialogue in the entire game.
You keep cleaning up after everyone, Batman, and no one's going to learn to take care of themselves. The ones that don't hate you, they'll start to rely on you, depend on you. And if something happens to you, if you get old or bored or die, then what? Or do you not consider the world that revolves around you? You're a hypocrite, running around dispensing justice, telling people what they can and can't do. You're ensuring Gotham's freedom, provided it conforms to your twisted view. Whatever pleases the bad. That it? You're not a hero. You're a despot. You don't enforce justice. You suppress it. I think I figured it out. You didn't take me down because I broke the law. No, you took me down because you don't want the competition. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Let me ask you something. You ever wonder if you're the reason the city's so messed up? Because I have. A lot of us have. And I'm starting to think we're right.
Sadly though, despite all the effort put into his characterization, he's barely in the game at all, and his quest can be completed in minutes. It's a shame the writers didn't do more with him, but I digress.
You don't get it. Anarchy gets it, but you don't get it, man.
His side mission is exactly the same as the Zsasz mission from Arkham City. Just get to a waypoint on the map before the time runs out, simple. Then you get a short, easy boss battle. The Deadshot mission ends up being pretty much exactly the same as the Two-Face battle from the Catwoman bundle, and there's really nothing else to it. The Mad Hatter level is very similar to the Scarecrow levels in Arkham Asylum, and here it felt so out of place to me for some reason.
You were very cordially, you were very cordially invited to a party.
And it will be a grand affair.
Grand affair, and it will be a grand affair hosted by the Hatter.
It's like the writers thought, well, people liked Mad Hatter in Arkham City, so let's add him here, regardless of what he adds to the story. In Arkham City, Hatter was crucial to the plot, since he was the one who developed Hugo Strange's mind control drugs. In this game, he just seems like a cameo. Shiva, who's supposed to be one of the assassins, barely does anything. I mean, her side mission was the most forgettable thing in the entire game. Seriously, I can't think of a single side mission in this game that was memorable or original, or stands out on its own, and to me that's really disappointing. There's even a side mission where you have to destroy drug containers, and again, this is exactly the same as the Titan Containers side mission that you do for Bane in Arkham City, just another blatant rip-off. There are a lot of repeat missions like this. Another disappointment for me was the boss battles. While a few of them were pretty good, for some reason I found most of them pretty boring and tedious. Particularly when compared to the excellent boss battles from Arkham City. The only boss battle that was memorable to me was the Deathstroke battle. Mostly because of the way it was introduced, which is awesome.
You're running out of time.
Wait. Lacey Towers. There was a murder.
It was supposed to be his same house. But, oh, Black Man, he's got problems of his own, I'd say. Someone broke in there.
It appears the game is over before it even begins.
I'm not playing games, Slade.
Yeah, Deathstroke was kind of the poster boy for the game. He was in pretty much all the trailers and marketing, and he was clearly made out to be one of the main villains. Unfortunately, despite getting a pretty badass intro, and a genuinely fun and challenging boss battle, he isn't in the game much, and he kinda disappears afterwards. Aside from Deathstroke, they all pretty much feel the same, with the exception of the Firefly battle on the bridge, which is basically drawn out with the same attacks repeated over and over. It looks awesome though. You fight Bane like 3 times in this game, and only the final fight was interesting and gave the game a bit of a survival horror vibe. Aside from that, they're pretty much all the same. In addition to all this, the game once again has many collectibles. First of all, in place of the riddles and Riddler trophies from the previous games, you now have to collect extortion data.
Think of me as an information broker. I've got data handlers everywhere, feeding me all kinds of interesting stuff.
And you think this is going to destroy Gotham?
Basically, Riddler has collected information on Gotham citizens and is attempting to extort them. You have to traverse the game, solving puzzles and gathering all this information to thwart Riddler's plans. You can also once again interrogate Riddler's informants to release the locations of the collectibles on the map. For some reason I found this really boring this time, particularly since the stakes aren't really that high. There's no hostages or anything like that, and Riddler doesn't appear to be tied into the main story this time, making his collectibles seem completely inconsequential. Don't get me wrong, I did find them all and I did 100% the game, but I did so more or less due to me being a completionist than anything else. Also, finding collectibles once again gains you bonus features and experience points, allowing you to level up quicker. Speaking of leveling up, the game once again has a simple yet good leveling up system that allows you to unlock various upgrades to help you in the game. There are also other collectibles such as anarchy tags that you can scan hidden around the city, as well as these hidden letters connected to Gotham's oldest cold case. These were interesting enough. One problem I did have with the Riddler collectibles is that many of the puzzles involving them were the exact same as the ones in Arkham City. Again, showing no innovation whatsoever. Pretty much all of them are easy to obtain, and doing this for the 3rd game in a row just felt tedious to me. Like, I've done this 2 times already, what is the point? So that pretty much sums up what the game has to offer in terms of gameplay, level design, combat and boss battles. And by now you should have a pretty good idea of the game's story and how it's introduced. For the next part of the video, I want to talk a bit more deeply about the story and get into some of the spoilers. Okay, so first of all, the story of this game doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, it's not terrible, but there's a lot of things about it that just don't add up, or at very least are extremely contrived. As I mentioned before, the game is set years before Arkham Asylum, which at the time was supposed to be the longest night of Batman's life, with him attempting to stop a mass breakout and having to take on several of his rogues gallery on the same night, pushing him to the absolute brink. Arkham City took that same concept and expanded upon it, putting Batman in a situation where you really felt that he was absolutely overwhelmed, and it was pretty much his last hurrah. Well, this game insinuates that Batman met all these villains on the same night, and was able to defeat them pretty much at once, years before those events, and for me it just felt forced. In addition to that, the main plot point of Batman having a bounty on his head gets shafted pretty quickly, and the story kind of limps on with no direction or purpose. And to top it all off, Black Mask, who was advertised as the game's main villain, is barely even in the game. And when he is, he's kind of inconsequential. So the plot twist that you'll learn around about the midway point of the game is that Black Mask from the intro is actually the Joker in disguise, who has taken over Black Mask's operations, and that the real Black Mask is locked away somewhere. It was Joker who placed the bounty on Batman for some reason, and once again he takes over as the main villain and it becomes all about the Joker, just like every game in the series. I don't know what it is about these Batman games, but for some reason the Joker always has to take the shine away from the other villains. This was fine in Arkham Asylum, since it was well established in that game's marketing that Joker was the main villain who set the events in motion. And in Arkham City he was simply one faction leader, and wasn't always the centre of attention in that game. But in this game, other villains like Black Mask and Deathstroke get completely sidelined in favour of the Joker, who by that point was just overused in my opinion. I remember playing this for the first time and thinking, you've gotta be kidding me, the Joker again, really, come on man. Maybe this won't bother some of you guys, but at the time of Arkham Origins release, I was getting sick and tired of the Joker being in everything. Also, when the Joker gets revealed, it becomes clear that the bounty on Batman is no longer in effect. Yet despite this, the assassins still go after him, and still put innocent lives in danger just to draw him out. And the plot still continues aimlessly. It just spirals into absolute nonsense after the midway point, and it felt so contrived to me. The game's ending is also extremely anticlimactic, and nowhere near as memorable or as profound as Arkham City's. It made the game feel like a cash grab to me, and one that didn't need to exist. And that's not to say that I don't like the game, because I do. It's still very fun to play at times, but I find myself wondering the same thing I did when it first came out, and that is, was the game really necessary? Did it really need to exist? I mean, what did it add to the series that it couldn't have done without? I personally can't think of anything, can you? Another thing I didn't like much about the game was the dialogue. Some of it was pretty corny, and a lot of it just didn't make sense. For some reason they never got Kevin Conroy to voice Batman this time, and he honestly sounds nothing like him. This was really distracting for me. Thankfully the guy they got to voice Joker did a great job. Troy Baker I think it was. He actually sounded quite a bit like Mark Hamill.
Now why would you do that?
I actually thought it was him for a while. So yeah, his voice acting was great, I really enjoyed it. Aside from him, there were no standouts. As far as bonus features go, the game has plenty of character bios, interview tapes and all that good stuff. You can also unlock new costumes, as well as new gameplay modes. You once again have a New Game Plus mode, as well as a secondary New Game Plus mode called I Am the Night, which means you will have to complete the entire game without dying once. This is difficult but possible. If I can do it, you probably can. As far as the graphics and presentation, the game looks great for the most part, at least in terms of graphical fidelity. But sadly, as I mentioned before, the environments and locations just look bland, and they look pretty uninspired to me. Thankfully the character models and cutscenes look great.
Reminder to all units, we'll be accepting donations and cards for Commissioner Loeb's family in the break room. Please come by and pay your respects.
So yeah, that pretty much sums up my thoughts on the game. I give Arkham Origins a generous 7 out of 10. I was tempted to give it an 8, but given all my criticisms in this video, I think a 7 is a fair score. So yeah guys, that's my review for Batman Arkham Origins, and it's my last video for 2023. Hope you guys have enjoyed the content this year. I certainly had fun making it. Since the year's over now, and I have nothing in the works for 2024 as of yet, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about something that up until now I've been putting off talking about. And that is my overall thoughts on the channel and where I go from here in regards to future content. Also, it gives me a chance to summarise the success of the channel and address all the feedback, and ponder to myself whether or not what I'm doing is good enough, or whether it can be improved in any way, or whether it's even worth continuing at all. The reason I bring all this up is because no doubt most of you will have noticed that despite everything, the channel hasn't really been growing at all in the past year. Which is interesting to me for several reasons. Basically, in the past year, I've been experimenting with a general variety of mixed content, be it reviews, topical gaming videos, character profiles, retrospectives, lore videos, and even some let's plays, which I basically make purely for my own amusement. And basically no matter what I do, and no matter what I upload, the feedback that I get is generally positive. In fact, the vast majority of my videos get 100% positive feedback from viewers. I very rarely get dislikes, and when I do, it usually comes from fanboys of a particular game that I happen to criticise. Point being, I pretty much never get any genuine negative feedback. And according to the channel's metrics, analytics and feedback from my viewing audience, everything seems to be going well. And clearly people like what I'm doing here. Yet despite that, not only is the channel not growing, but videos I upload just aren't getting views. I upload a video, and as I mentioned before, it gets pretty much 100% positive feedback. The quality is good. I put a lot of time and effort into editing, recording and producing them. I use all my own recordings in every single video, as well as editing, funding and producing them myself, 100% autonomous, independent and most importantly, uncorrupted and authentic. And despite all this, there's hardly any views on my videos. The reason this concerns me so much is because when I upload a video, it gets a decent number of views in its first 24 hours. Then after that, it basically gets buried and never gets viewed again. Again, this is in spite of the fact that the videos get pretty much 100% positive feedback from viewers. And it's making me wonder, and call me a cynic if you want to, but is there something else going on here? Is YouTube artificially suppressing and hiding the channel, preventing me from getting views somehow? What do you guys think? Am I just being paranoid, or is that happening? Because I can't think of a single reason why the videos aren't getting views. And I'm not gonna lie, it's starting to make all the work I put into them feel like a complete waste of time and effort. I mean, I'd understand not getting views if the content wasn't good, but as I said before, people like the content. It gets mostly positive feedback. So clearly people who see the videos do like what I'm doing and enjoy the content, and no doubt would like to see me continue making videos. Don't get me wrong, it's relatively inconsequential to me, since this isn't my livelihood or anything like that, it's just a hobby. But like I said before, I put a lot of time and effort into these videos, and that time and effort could easily be spent elsewhere if I wanted it to. So at this point in time, I am at very least considering the future of the channel, if things don't start to pick up a bit. Since I look at the general quality of a lot of gaming channels out there, and I feel as if a lot of the gaming related content that gets promoted these days is generally quite gimmicky, if you know what I mean. And there are very, very few genuine, independent content creators out there, which is sad in my opinion, because there used to be loads, you know? That's all I have to say on the issue. Suffice it to say, if people don't start watching the videos, then I have to at least consider whether or not it's worth my time and effort. Nonetheless, thanks for watching guys. I hope you all have a great Christmas. God bless each and every one of you. Stay tuned for more retrospective video game reviews in the new year. Thanks for watching and God bless.
Not tonight.
No such thing as a Batman, huh?